It's just I usually have their screen fully over here, but now I can't see when they type something. Sorry? Yeah, they're good to go. Okay, that's perfect. And I think they can they hear me? I can see levels on here. Yeah, if you just let me know if they say something, because when these slides are up, it's harder to switch, yeah. For the most part, I'll be. It's just an intro. Okay, I guess they're good. Okay, sweet, thanks. Hey, so I'm back. I went on vacation, and it was pretty good. It's a nice time off. I'm really excited to be back, though, because I came just in time for testing. I went to Yellowknife, and it's really cool. Yeah, Yellowknife is cool. It's not really a place I ever thought of going before. Then my dad moved there for work for a few years, and so the opportunity came up. I said, yeah, got to go. So it was the second time, and it was the winter this time instead of the summer. And so instead of it being light all day, it actually didn't get dark as early as I thought it would. But this time we actually got to see the Northern Lights because it actually got dark. So that was pretty exciting. Unfortunately, only one of the days was clear, but it was last night, and then we were out, I guess, watching the lights till 1 or 2, and then flight at 4 a.m. So it was an all right time to do it, I guess. Yeah, but I'm back now, and like I said, just in time for testing. So who here kind of thinks that we should have started our final projects on Monday and not wasted this time on testing? Okay, no, yeah, a little bit? Okay. It's okay to feel that way, because I think it's entirely valid to be like, well, I mean, we're writing more code, but it's not actually doing anything for us. It's not making our product look or behave better, it seems. And that's not entirely obvious all the time. I mean, some people may just get it, but I don't expect that of people. I think we need to go through the sort of the why a lot with testing and understand the benefit it gives to us, because it's not immediately apparent. And so I think it's really important we do have even just a little bit of time talking about testing. Even though I don't expect anyone here to add testing to their final project, I've only seen it maybe once or twice before, where people had actually set up the tests and even written just one test, which, it's not a bad exercise, really. You don't have to write full set of tests. You don't have to spend your whole final project doing that. But if you just set up the testing framework and write one test, you're way farther than anyone else kind of gets with that, okay? Today we're going to be talking about a different type of testing. So yesterday was more about unit testing, this idea that we can focus on these small little pieces and test them in isolation. But that doesn't satisfy all of our testing requirements, in the sense that sometimes we need to make sure that a user can interact with the site in the way that the user interacts with the site. So the example that I have for you today is Jungle. And I have a basic version of Jungle. I did not implement all of the features that you added. But I did add the ones I needed to be able to test what I believe to be the most important part of the site, which is adding a product to the cart, checking it out, putting the credit card in, and getting that confirmation at the end that says, thank you for your order. And if we can do that, then the rest of the testing, it might be less important, because this is what makes the money for the site. And so when it comes to testing, we focus on the most important stuff first, because it's not really as feasible maybe to cover everything. You go into a project, there's no testing, choose what to do first, probably the order checkout stuff if that exists on your site, right? So today I do want to talk about strategic testing, because you do have to come up with some sort of a testing strategy. Whatever that means, it can include automated testing, maybe it does not, but there has to be some way for you to confirm that the code you write does what you promise your users it would do, right? If you have a good test strategy in place and you do have some automated tests set up, then you can start to consider something called continuous integration, and its sort of next step, which is continuous deployment or continuous delivery. CD kind of stands for a few different things depending on who you talk to. But the idea is that we can automatically get the changes to our product out there in a very smooth, fluid, consistent manner, rather than saying, I'm going to put a new piece of work out there every 2 weeks. We're going to wait until every 2 weeks and do a release. Basically, continuous delivery is this idea that maybe you could just release every commit that changes your software. That would be really fast iteration. So I think it's the companies that have the that have the capital to do it, that have the culture to do it, will integrate CI/CD, and they'll be better off for it. RSpec and Capybara are going to be sort of the implementation details for us. These are the specific tools that we're going to use to do these integration tests, which are basically, you're basically just saying, hey, test, find this input field, type in this name, find this other input field, type in this password, click the submit button. It'll wait till it goes to the next page. Find the button that says add product. You know, you're just basically telling a robot how to do the stuff you would do manually, except you can just run it over and over and over with no additional cost to you after that, right? So pretty powerful stuff. Strategic testing. Yeah, this can come in so many different forms. I don't remember what I have next here. Yeah, it's all about balance, though, because we can't actually achieve perfection when it comes to this. It's just so hard to do. We need to focus on balance. And when I say balance, it's around focusing on the most important things. Let's test the things that make us the money. That's good. That's how we balance out this whole thing. Let's test the things that we're unsure about or that we're going to be changing a lot. That's also something we would prioritize when we're writing tests. So we balance out where we apply the tests, and over time we come up with a pretty good test strategy. There's manual testing. This is what you have been doing up until now. Tiny app, Tweeter, everything. It's just I go to the browser and I do the stuff that I would expect a user to do. But the problem is that I don't believe you actually do what a user might do, and it's entirely possible that a user would put something in there that you would never think of and will break your app as a result of it. So we need to put ourselves into different people's shoes, and that's the shoes of someone who is experienced with using interfaces and breaking interfaces and coming up with ways to do that. This is, I've worked with these people, and they're incredible at this job. We think a QA job is, you know, some lonely dude sitting in a basement just playing the same game over and over and over again, and it's, I mean, it feels like that sometimes, but what it really is these people that come up with very interesting ways to simulate what possibly could happen to the very small percentage of people in the real world. So here's an example. A lot of the bugs that I'd have to fix in video games, because we had this networking that was added, big component of maybe from 2004, 2005 until I guess I left in 2012, 2013. So a lot of online functionality being added to these games. And so one of the things that QA testers would love to do, because they could always find bugs and that's their job, is they would advance on something in the game, they would try and do something within the game, and then pull out the network cable and see whether or not the game recovered well from that. And very rarely did it recover well from that, and that's where I spent a lot of time fixing issues, right? So you need to be thinking about, let me try doing this thing and pull out the network cable and put it back in before I get a disconnection, but maybe I create some packet loss, and how does that affect the experience? Because that's kind of like when I'm walking, you know, under a bridge or something like that, and the cell phone reception goes down, but I'm still trying to watch those videos. We have to simulate what the real world is like, and it's not you sitting at a high-speed internet connection with a fast computer. That's not really everyone's experience, right? So put yourself in someone else's shoes. Put negative numbers. Put strings where you expect numbers and numbers where you expect strings. Out of bounds. Put numbers higher than the limit for a 32-bit integer. Remember YouTube and Gangnam Style? Broke YouTube because they used 32-bit integers to store the number of views, and your limit is, well, I guess if it's a signed integer, it's 2.1 billion, but if it's not, it's like 4.2 billion. But as soon as there were more views than that, no longer could actually keep track of that, so they had to go to a 64. But maybe if they had run some video up to that level, or seen what would happen if someone had over a couple billion views, they would have fixed that problem ahead of time. But they didn't think that that was something that would be possible when they created the software, and YouTube exploded, and something, you know, it got lost, right? Not a big bug, not a big deal, and great publicity, I think, for both Sci and YouTube, I think. All right, code coverage. It's this idea that we can actually, I mean, we have a certain number of lines of code, a certain number of functions in our application. We can count those number of functions, figure out how many of them are tested out of how many there are in total, and then we get a code coverage percentage, right? I have a few problems with code coverage. One of them is that it doesn't have any indication of whether or not what percentage of the code you're covering is actually super important or even necessarily run by normal user interaction. So we want to not necessarily shoot for 100% on this because that's not necessarily a good use of our time, and it's not necessarily a good test strategy. So the target is project-based, and it's mostly based on how critical to the business is that part of the website, just like I said before. So you can use this metric or not, but I don't think it's as important as some people make it out to be. And if I go to Facebook or React GitHub site, you're going to notice that some larger libraries, this is just one example, have these little badges down here. And so there's two badges in particular that I want to talk about today. One of them is called coverage, which is what I just explained, right? So we can say that React is 90% of the code in the React library is covered by their automated test system. And if we click on the coverage button here, we're actually going to go to a site called Coveralls. And this is a site that allows you to track over time and over your commits what the coverage was. And so we see here we get a big jump in coverage. And over here we lose some coverage and then wait for a little while, go back up. And so this is just a matter of someone added a bunch of code but not a lot of tests. Someone added the tests for those things. And then maybe even a bit more since we actually kind of went up faster. And then here someone looks like added a bunch of code and then didn't add tests for it, and then kind of so we can kind of see how the project's going. This number, I think that's a great number, and I hope that React is happy and confident with that number, or the Facebook team's confident with that number. In addition, actually I'll come back to this after. So unit testing comes with, I'd say, a number of benefits. Encapsulation, I think that's pretty understood as a concept, right? Things are contained, self-contained, or contained within, and don't really rely on sort of the external maybe side effects or what else is going on in the application. And that's basically a function that takes in. So pure function is great encapsulation because it takes in parameters, and when those parameters are taken in, it returns the same result no matter if whenever those parameters are passed in, it always returns the same result. So there's no outside influence on that function. If I say it's an add function, I pass it 1 and 2, it always gives me 3 back. Right? That's encapsulation. So that's the benefit of unit testing. Unit testing, we can just focus on that one function, try some good inputs, try some bad inputs, and expect things to happen. Right? Unit testing also comes with speed. It's maybe not in writing them so much. After a little while, you get comfortable with it. You can actually leverage code you've already written, use them in other tests perhaps. But I would say that after you've written some tests, it's a lot faster to run some unit tests than maybe have to do some of that testing manually. We don't do a lot of unit testing manually though, right? We do most of our testing, manual testing is integration testing. Sometimes I will write a function and then I'll just write some code and then call the function 8 different times with different inputs and assert that something is true. And that just helps me test that one function specifically, because if I write 6 functions and then try and put them all together, what happens if one of those functions doesn't work? I have to now track that down. But if I just make sure that every function that I write works independently, then I won't run into those issues, or I won't have as much of a hard time kind of tracking them down. Has anyone heard the term regression in terms of testing? Okay, so what does it mean? Okay, so new code that I add doesn't break old stuff. Yeah, and I would just say that basically once I found a bug, I need to continue to test to make sure that that bug has not come back. And so this is actually unfortunate for manual QA testers because they really have a very specific part of a product, let's say, to work on. And they really are going over that thing every single day over and over and over again. And they're going back through all the bugs that they've already tested over the past few months, and they're retesting them on every couple days, let's say. And so this is regression testing, super important. Unit testing helps us with that. Because if we find a bug and we didn't have a test for it, maybe we write a test for it, and now we're doing a regression on every single commit on that bug. That's actually, I think, a huge benefit to automated testing, is that you don't have to then go and think about it much anymore after you've identified the bug and written a test for it. There's some maintenance and stuff like that, of course, but yeah, regression can be very costly, and I would say that people who don't want to pay the money just don't do it well, right? Don't want to spend the time and effort on it, don't do it well. I had something else I was going to say, but I'll come back to it. Whatever. So I got this word confidence up here. I think that it's critical that we have confidence when we release software. It's, that our software is going to work in the way that we expect it to. And I think unit testing provides some of that for us, although not alone. But a good test strategy does give us confidence in our product. And then I've put down reliability and stability. And I would say you could argue reliability and stability in my software is what gives me the confidence. But I want to call it out specifically because I believe that there's a group of people that care a lot about reliability and stability that are not your end users. Right? And they're the other developers on your team. Because if you commit something and it breaks your project and people have to think about that rather than the new features they have to build, then they are getting hindered from doing their work. Your company's paying people money for sort of having to wait for your issues to be resolved. That's kind of there's a negativity around that, and I think that a good test strategy gives us reliability and stability in our development environment, so we can move faster, that we can iterate faster, and we can get to a better product faster. Also comes with, I'd say most testing comes with these sort of downfalls, but unit testing for sure. It's expensive. I mean, to do anything that's not directly adding to your product can be considered expensive. And part of the expense comes from the maintenance that has to come with this, right? Anytime you write code that does something and you have to write a test for it and you change the code that does something else, now you have to change that test for it. Kind of like comments, they need maintenance. And kind of like comments, maybe we just don't write them and then don't need to maintain them. I don't know. They're difficult. Who thinks that unit testing is difficult? Was it difficult in the morning yesterday? And then easy in the afternoon? Okay. Some of it does get easier. I hope today I can kind of show you that those who create, sorry? No? More tedious, okay. Yeah, it's it feels that way, I get it. It's, okay, so not difficult, that's good. I think that putting yourself into a little bit of a different mindset and thinking about your code from the opposite side, which is sort of how it will be run, is actually a really good practice for improving your development in general. So test-driven development can really help you become a better developer because you're actually thinking about what does it mean for this thing to be done before you even build the thing, and that's I think that's sort of an intermediate step to development, or a step that an intermediate developer takes for sure. Now here's the problem we're going to solve today is the specificity of unit testing, is that we're not going to focus on one area, one specific unit. We're going to be focusing on how the pieces integrate together, how the login flow works with the ordering system, and that's really what we're dealing with today is specificity. So here's what feature and integration testing does. It allows us to simulate the user interaction. So if we've built up this set of automated tests and we're happy with them, and so this would be the sort of a workflow when it comes to continuous integration. We currently live in the develop and commit into source control area. We don't stray from that very much right now, but that hopefully will change, and hopefully you all get hired by companies that have this in place. That shows some maturity, I believe. The idea is you develop, you commit, and then your source control has the ability to actually use something called hooks. And these hooks are listening for certain events to occur, including maybe you pushing code to a remote repo. On triggering that hook, it will actually run a script for you that you define, and that script will go through the process of building maybe npm install if it's a Node project, Maybe it will do a migration of the database if that's needed, which usually it makes sense to do that. And then it will run your app for you in an environment called the test environment, and it will run all of your tests against the code. And then it'll likely you have an integration testing piece of software, and that software will handle tracking all of the tests that had been run and what the progress was on those and whether or not there were issues with that. And then it will also do reporting, so you might get an email back to your entire team saying, someone made a commit and it broke this test here. And now everyone knows about it, and that person has to fix it. Report and then repeat. Report and repeat, report and repeat, right? So great process. Let's look at what it might actually look like in reality. Circle CI, that's one of the tools we could use for continuous integration. Travis CI, yep. There's lots of different options. This is what this one looks like. We can see that there is for every pull that came into this project, there's a fixed, failed, success status on it. There's more complexity to this as well. Excuse me, but we can have this for our own project and for our own team, and we can track this a lot easier. So, as was mentioned, lots of tools for this. We'll get to that in a second. Once you have the continuous integration system set up, then you have an option to potentially automatically push that code, if it passes, to production. And then your user will just be able to access it, right? And so this is sort of when Facebook talked about moving fast and breaking things. This is what they were talking about. They were talking about their code automatically would be, the code that they commit to their version control would automatically be deployed to their end user. So of course things are going to break. But the key there is that you have a system in place that allows you to revert that change very quickly, that you're committing in an intelligent, atomic way so that when you revert that one commit that broke the thing, everything else remains there, that you're not doing these massive monolithic commits where you have to now cherry pick the parts of the code that you actually want to integrate into yourself, or you're holding off on that stuff because it's not ready yet, because something else is holding it up. These are all make us move way too slow. I don't know if I really believe 100% in this idea, because it takes an incredible when you have that as your motto, the reason why it may have worked for them is because the entire company believed it, and I don't know that it would work in a company that says, yeah, testing's cool and all, but I want to see some new bling on it. So if you're kind of hesitant about it, do not do this, because the culture will not support it. So in that case, you might have this in play, which is actually a pretty good compromise. And this is a move fast and break things in a controlled environment that we only have access to. And then when everything's good in that place, we push it over to the production that our users have access to. So here, in this case, we might have a staging server, which is a replica of the environment that we would run our production code in. And from our commits through the testing process, changes will automatically get pushed to that internal staging server, and then we're really testing production internally that way. And then when we're happy with that, we press a button and it just pushes the change to production. I would expect this to be more common in a continuous integration, continuous deployment system, or within companies here at least. That's what I would expect. All right, so lots of tools to help with this. Jenkins, Travis CI, Circle CI, Bamboo. There's probably 15 more that I didn't put in here. I put a pretty good combination of open source, SaaS, and like enterprise, lots of money licensing software. So Bamboo is that lots of money enterprise software. It's Atlassian. It's Confluence and Jira and Bamboo that go together. Circle CI is sort of like a middle of the road kind of like relatively inexpensive, maybe like $15 a month kind of, $15, $20 a month kind of thing. And then I think Jenkins and Travis are more open source. You can set them up on your own machines, but you have to take care of all that and manage them yourself. So totally up to you which one you want to go with. One that I'm actually kind of interested in lately is the GitLab integration. They have continuous integration into GitLab, which is almost like a self-installed GitHub. that you can use if you want to manage all that yourself. So lots of options for that. RSpec is going to be, again, the Ruby testing tool. This is a test runner. It's responsible for running a bunch of tests and then reporting back information to us. But Capybara is the framework that's going to allow us to interact with what we're going to call a headless browser. A headless browser is, what's a headless browser actually? Anybody? Yeah, okay. Mm. Yeah, it's like having a browser that you can't see, but that still exists with a full DOM implementation, and you can still, there are still text fields, they just don't get rendered to a screen, right? So Phantom.js is the one we're going to use today. There's a couple options for that as well. But what it does is it basically just loads our site into a browser and allows us to manipulate or interact with the DOM so we can enter logins and names and click buttons and all that kind of stuff. All right, any questions before we write to them? Yeah, so the question is, I said Phantom.js, but can Capybara use some other headless browser? And yes, they can be configured for a different headless browser, JS driver, they call it. We'll look at the documentation. I think Selenium is the other option there, or one of the other options. There might be 2 or 3 that I saw in their documentation. So yeah. It's also funny with Phantom.js that I was about to do this lecture months ago, and I was on Hacker News and I saw that this headline that Phantom.js had been archived, that they weren't maintaining it anymore. I was like, oh no, and I'm teaching this stuff. Like, is that really useful? Should I be teaching things that are archived and not in use anymore? And it's worth going and reading kind of their reasoning for doing that, and basically just no necessary contributions. And that's actually a really good sign for a package that doesn't need to be changed anymore. It means people are happy with the features that are there and they're able to use it. It's not that people were looking for alternatives, it's that they didn't need to spend any more time really thinking about the project. And so I think Phantom.js is still totally valid, even though you go to its site and it says it's archived. Yeah, we'll see. They might open it back up, maybe not. Doesn't really matter. It still works.
Do they depend on any output of the browser or something like that?
Oh, yeah. So the question, do they depend on source code in the browsers? I bet you there's a implementation. They're using like WebKit. No, it's not WebKit. It's like maybe WebKit or Blink or something like that, and V8 or what? Like they'd be using open source. The guts of the browsers. They'd be using open source versions of that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then just ripping away the user interface part of it and keeping everything else. So. All right. Awesome. Okay. I guess I should run this. Okay, it's almost over. It's so gross, isn't it? It's okay. The hip strips, yeah. So this product, or this site here, I've got my products page here, user, login, register. I added this stuff to it. I can log in. Oh, cool, thanks. I'm now logged in. I can add a product to the cart and go to the cart. I can pay with a card. And when I do that, I get a confirmation email or saying, thank you for your order. First at user.com. And so this is the flow that I'd want to test. I'd want to be able to do all of these things from the beginning to the end of what you saw, but I want to do it automatically and be able to run it maybe in my continuous integration instead. So we got this tool RSpec. What we need to do is Web Compass. Let's go there. Of course. So I've done this part already. So this is an assignment for you today. It is, I think. No, wait, is it from yesterday? No, wrong week. There we go. It used to be week 7 that we did this, because we had 8 weeks total, and so this would have been, yeah. So still, like this thing here, it says week 8, day 2, but it's in a folder called week 7 still, because I don't know, didn't change it. Okay, so now that we're looking at the right day, capybara and poltergeist setup. So we go in here, we follow those instructions, and they help us set up capybara poltergeist with Phantom.js and this thing called database cleaner. And the idea is that once we've installed Phantom, which is a NPM package, it's actually a node package, kind of cool. We then install the gems. The gems include something called poltergeist, and poltergeist is the interface between this JavaScript node package and our Ruby code, because there's no actual Ruby interface for Phantom.js built into it. So there's this wrapper code that allows you to interact with it in Ruby, but the package is called poltergeist. That's what that's there for. Makes kind of sense, poltergeist, Phantom.js, I guess. People love naming things. Yeah, so follow these. Database cleaner, we just want to clean up our database after each test. Yeah, that's what I've done this already. So once that's done, and I run rspec, I have no tests yet, so I need to Rails G. I'm going to list out all the different tests that I could run, or I guess tests that I could create. And there's this one here called rspec feature. And so these generators, when you start a Rails project, the generators are not locked in. The new ones are added as you add gems, right? So a new gem that you install could add a generator to your list of generators here that you could use. And the one that we're interested in is the one that allows us to write feature specifications, and that's I believe this one is added when we install capybara. That you can do a model with rspec, but in order to do feature testing, I believe capybara is the one that adds that. So I'm going to Rails G rspec feature, call this orders. So here's my orders test that I'm creating. Now put that file into the spec features orders spec RB, and I can open that up, and I'm going to be able to run this as well. So, all right, pending, not yet implemented. So that's where we are. I'm going to write a little bit of this test, and then we can take our break in 20 minutes or so. So this will be a little bit different than what you had yesterday. I think it was describe. Was it up here? Or something? Yeah, describe. And it does something. So here's a scenario for you. User can order after logging in. This happens where, maybe this is legacy. I actually have not looked into why they use rspec.feature instead of just saying describe, and why they use scenario instead of it. This is sort of this kind of comes with this domain-specific language, and people have opinions on what good testing systems are. So don't get too caught up on that. Usually you kind of just have to look at the other files, or the nice thing about the generators is they helped me out with that, right? But I also had to just tell you about this scenario thing. But if I'm using capybara, then they've got documentation for me. I love this picture of, I love this guy. So good. I wish that the rest of their documentation was so approachable. It's a little unfortunate. Stay away from this side over here, unless you really want to get into it. But this is the class sort of list, and it's just like this is just way too specific on on the interface that we want to actually spend our time over here where they've written some documentation for us. And here we can see, for example, using Capybara with many different options in terms of which test runner we're going to have. Test unit, mini test, Cucumber. We're using RSpec. We've also got different drivers we can use. Selenium, Capybara WebKit, that kind of makes sense. Poltergeist, that's another option, yeah. Oh, it's so, right, the question is why do we not just use the testing features inside Ruby? So you're saying there's built-in features or testing features in Ruby. Why not simply just use test unit, I guess? What I'm noticing is that, so testing has gone through a lot of iteration. And there are some people that believe those who design the features could actually write the acceptance tests as well. So some people want to go all the way into a English language-like description of what the test should do and what it means to accept it. And I think that that might be a little too far. I think that you still need developers to write tests, or for the most part. And so good for anyone who can do it. But developers have opinions on how that should happen. And I think that people compete essentially with their frameworks. And I don't know specifically why they chose RSpec for this program, but it is recognized as sort of like that is the test runner. JavaScript for Ruby in the JavaScript world, but also I think RSpec might be a little heavier than test unit, and so Rails is like, well, we don't want to make this decision for you, but we will put a little bit in there to help you out, but we're not going to make the full decision on how you're going to fully implement your tests for you. I think they want to stay away from that decision. With JavaScript, I feel like it's still kind of Wild West. They're still figuring out which ones are the best, because you've got Mocha and Chai, which were sort of #1 for a while, and now you've got Jest and Enzyme and like these other projects that are coming out, because I think we can always kind of improve this. And I think that's RSpec was I'm not sure the history, but you know, RSpec is a pretty good way to do it. And RSpec, I believe, Eric, you were having an issue getting RSpec installed, and before that, you weren't actually able to kind of create all of the tests that you wanted to. Yeah, and so when you install RSpec, you'll notice that in your generator, you just get a bunch more types of tests, and so you get your RSpec model test and your RSpec controller test and all these tests, and you could do that without it, but I think they just kind of help a bit more. Also, it's hard to argue if I think software that has good documentation and gets supported by the community will thrive, and RSpec seems to be in that category. So once we've chosen Capybara, we go to the documentation. We've got this DSL. So a DSL is domain-specific language, yeah. So the domain-specific language is one that describes testing for us. And so when we navigate, I would say that the language we use is we visit things. And so they've just added that as a function, and you can visit /projects, or you can visit based on that Rails path that we can use for most things. You can also click links and buttons. That's kind of cool, and actually just says that click link or click button or click on something. You can interact with forms, so you can do things like fill in or choose things or attach files to forms. That, again, using that language does feel pretty good with these tests. At the end, we expect things to happen. We expect things to have certain CSS or certain content on the page. These are pretty basic expectations with this type of testing. I've seen some actually really cool stuff with really updated forms of React testing on the UI. It's really getting better than this, so something to get excited about, to look forward to. We want to find stuff. We can do that. And then I just want to quickly mention that we also have this concept of scoping. And scoping says, within this area, I want to do all these things. And so I can just limit it to a subsection of the page, because if I have 2 forms with the same name, then which one should I actually be filling in? Well, maybe the one that is a subsection of the email contact form or something like that, right? So we'll use scoping to target our specific form or our specific iframe on the site. All right? So, first thing we want to do with our test is navigate to our first page. And so I'm kind of going to be going back and forth here. I'm going to say, I guess the first page is root. Right? That's where I want to go. Probably also do products. Let's see. Yeah, I think products is the same. So I could go to either. That's not what I want, right? I want to go log in. Okay, so this is actually what I want to do. The first thing I want to do is go to login, because I don't need to go to the root page to go to the login page, although that's normally what our users might do. I think we could just jump right to the login page. So we are going to visit the login page. And then we run our test. How do we confirm that we're visiting that page? There's a headless browser. I don't get to see it. And the logs, right? So this is going to start up a server and run it in a test environment. So this other server I have running, I don't expect it to actually get that output. But what I would say, we got some tools here. I can print stuff. I could print the contents of the page. I think I could actually just puts the page. Let's try that first. Oops. No, page content maybe, something like that. But I can output stuff. I can also very easily save a screenshot. And it's able to actually take a screenshot of what the page would look like if I was looking at it in the browser. I'm going to give it an orders.png name. Now I'll run rspec. And where we're going to find this file is actually in our Jungle. What happened? Yes, there's one step that I forgot. So here the error that I'm getting, saying cannot, not supported by driver error. I can't save the screenshot. I don't have this driver. It's not supported. And the reason why this is happening is because I forgot to add one more parameter to this rspec feature function, which is JS true. So I'm telling that this set of tests need to load the JavaScript driver, and we configure it for the test. Because it takes a little time to bring this up and down, so we don't want to do it all the time, only for the tests that actually need that driver. Okay, now I'll try that again. And like I was saying before, if we go to this is our Jungle app here. We go down to the temp directory, TMP. And inside there is a Capybara directory. And in Capybara we have orders. And orders looks like this now. So that's good. We visited the login page, and then we saved a screenshot of it. So we confirmed that we were there. Okay.
So it's going to run on server.
Yeah.
So we cannot be on the other server.
Yeah.
Is there a log file for that?
Probably. Let's see. Rails. I don't do a lot of Rails development, so I don't have it on. No, but it's easy to look up. Alternatively, I would just search it and see. I haven't had the need to do that, but I bet you can. I mean, it wouldn't. Maybe you're running your test with a certain flag. Maybe it's just a general Rails log output flag. Maybe it just logs everything to a file that I haven't noticed. Because I usually just use the console when I'm running the app, right? Just like we all do. Rails test log output. Where is that? Oh wow, this one's actually talking about using the logger in your tests and confirming that certain stuff is logged out when you. That's kind of interesting. I don't know about that. Tail your test logs. So tailing is this idea that you, like, it's a stream of output, so you want to see the end of it at all the time, and it'll just constantly, fill it with it. So tail. Let's see what happens when we tail f log test this stuff here. Okay. So now I need to figure out how to get this on one side, this on the other side, so we can actually see them at the same time. I'm going to clear this out. And so now the question is, when I run this test, do we see? Yeah, it looks like it. Okay, so what I'll do is I will kill this, and I will paste that into the channels, all right? Where are we? 27th, 20, yeah, thanks. Cool. All right, we're back. Okay, so where I left off, you know, I mean, we could take a break now, or we could fill in the form. What do you want to do first? Fill the form. Okay, cool. Let's do it. I kind of like this. Let's fill the form. No, it's a good choice. It was a good choice. It was the one I was really secretly hoping for. Okay, this looks like what we want here. I want to fill in some form with some content. And so I need to target the form. And just like with pretty much everything else in web development that's not HTTP, we have to kind of figure out what part of the page using selectors, right? Selectors are back. So I've got this form here, form action login. It looks like the right one. It's selected here. It's got a few different inputs, but the important ones are here, email and password, and then I have this submit button that I want to click. This one here? Yeah, it's generated by Rails. Yeah. Well, I mean, you can imagine that the test environment will have that form with these inputs in it, just like the page that we're rendering right now. And it should act the very, very same way, which is that it will have it included when it sends the message to the server. Right? Okay. We're going to interact with this form. So we're going to scope to this form, even though we don't have to for this page because there's no other form on it. It's just still a good idea to kind of do this scoping. So I think it's just within form. I think that's right. And that's also right. Within the form. Yeah, so that's right. So within form, I kind of like that better. What I want to do is I want to fill in, and then it's kind of like, well, what is it that I want to fill in? Here I've just put down specifically the ID with email, but it's pretty forgiving in terms of how you do that. I think I could just pass that as the first parameter. I could say fill in, I think it was username. Oh, sorry, it's email, you're right. So there's a few things here that identify this as email. The ID and the name, I can be specific about it, but I can also be a little bit ambiguous about it. Email, let's see about that. With, and then what do I put in here? Bob at Bob, or first. I mean, the thing is, we don't know the answer to this because we don't have a user, right? We have to create a user first. And so until I can do that, I need to do before all. Yeah, this is login. So if I'm testing register, then I'm doing it a little bit different because then I'm actually testing to see whether or not when I add this account that shows up in my database, that there's a model for it. But with this case, I'm actually just trying to log in so I can get to the next step, right? Well, let's create this user and not modify it at all. If I mutate this through my tests, then it will be mutated for every subsequent test, and that's a big problem. But if I'm just creating the user, I could do it here, just do it once, and then it'll be in my data. It should be in my database. Or with the database cleaner, it might not be the case. We'll see what happens here. this is specific to this feature, so if I created a different feature, I'd have to do it. Yeah. Yeah. We try to be, actually, Porch is usually safer for this stuff, especially if I'm doing this database cleaning, which is, my intention is that after every single test that's run in here, it actually clears the database and runs runs from scratch every time. I like that. So, sorry? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that one's be careful about like creating things and then mutating them in your tests. It might be a little bit more typing to create something unique, or like that's mostly the same but unique still in each test. I think yesterday, the validation testing stuff, I think it's a better process to create that resource with 3 good values and 1 bad value on each test, rather than trying to do it once at the top and then mutating that value. Sorry? Yeah. I think I was talking to Jeremy yesterday, and I think he came up, or he found the reason to not do the mutation at all, to not do that, because when you what he came across was money rails. When you create the product, you put in like $9.99, but then it converts it to price in cents in the database. And so if you want to try and modify that later on, it's not actually, when you do the assignment, it wasn't actually changing to nil. It would change to some other value, but not to nil for some reason. And so it was getting in the way. And so if you just actually created that product individually every time, then you could tell it nil price when you create it, rather than saying it's $3 in the good case, and then here with this test I want to set it to nil. It wasn't working for him. And so I would say that confirmed to me that a little bit more typing, but having it be a bit more encapsulated like that was a better approach. For this one, I think I could just do this for this test. I don't know what the other tests are, but it's also really easy for me to move this code around, and so I'm just going to go with something and change it later if I don't like it anymore. So when I create a user, I need to give them an email, right? Okay. Need to give them a password. What else do I have to give? A name or a full name or something like that? Here, this is, I think, what we need. So this would create a user called first user. And so that means that down here, I can now log in with first@user.com. And we'll just see if this works, because before I try and add the password, I should just make sure that my fill-in and my scoping and all that stuff is working. So test is run. And I can see here that it's added first@user.com. That's good. And I can just kind of copy that, change it from email to password, and then something like that. Now, kind of like to run this. It's going to become slower and slower every time as I make this test more extravagant, but for now, it's actually really cheap to check. So password's in there. I'm going to assume it's the right one. That's 6 characters. And so the last thing that I need to do is like click button submit or something like that. Let's try that. With more practice, I don't have to guess anymore, obviously, but it does become pretty straightforward. So I'm logged in. I'm on the products page. I've confirmed all that. So I'd say that this part of the test is working well for me. Let's take our 10-minute break and then come back and finish writing this thing up. let's do that and then get started again. So we left off, and we had run a test that basically got us to this point. So the next thing we want to do. Yeah, okay, yeah. Why is there no content? It's a good question. That's right, no products in the database. Database is empty. So one of the things we're going to need to be able to do, if we compare this to the site that's running behind it here, we're going to need to add at least one of these products so we can click this Add to Cart button. Right? It is, yeah. That's right, yeah. And that's what, and part of the setup you do with Database Cleaner, that's its job is to.
Have you done that part on your test? No.
So here, when you do these things, you're setting up also this Database Cleaner here. And that's what's helping us with cleaning out the tables.
So you did that.
I don't know. That's right. Yeah. So yeah, at the beginning I kind of mentioned that it was important that you do this before any of the stuff that I'm about to show you, because I had done this. I just didn't want to have to do it live in front. It didn't make sense to do it in front of you. Yeah. Okay. So we need to add some products, and we'll do that in our tests here. First, I guess, is a category dot create. Oh, I guess I got to do it. I don't need to create a. I do if I'm going to actually use it to create a product as well. So category dot create, and I think it just needs a name, something like that. And I can say category dot products dot create. And this one's a little tougher, but I need a name. A cool shirt. Description. What else? Price. Yeah. Is it quantity? Is it quantity or Q2Y? It's quantity, right? Thank you. Yeah. So the quantity, I'll just say there's one left, so we better get it. And image, right? You don't need an image, so we could leave it out. I can also just say, like, it doesn't really matter because we got a headless browser. So I don't know. It doesn't really matter what happens here. This price is in dollars when we create the thing, but then it's stored in our database in cents because we don't want to lose precision, right? This should be in dollars, yeah. And then, so this is kind of, you know, part of the thing. One of the things about Rails is that's kind of weird is sometimes you will create a model, you'll use a property, and that's actually not what it's called in the database because it's being converted behind the scenes. And then you look in the database, and there's a price cents field or something that actually stores this as, yeah. Because the main thing is when we store prices in cents rather than dollars because we don't want to lose precision, so we don't use decimal numbers for things that are important like that. So it makes sense to do it that way. It just is a little kind of confusing, I guess, when we actually create the product or when we see it in the database as well. So I guess the best thing to do here is to save this and run it and see if now we have any products on that page once we've done the login and everything. So I'm running the test. I take a look, and here it is, that product that we can add to the cart. Right? Very cheap, yeah. Kanye did it again. Didn't even need to show you a photo. Is it a brief? It's a Kanye moo-moo. Okay, so what do I want to do here? I want to find this thing. So I guess I should go back and think about this thing here that represents a product. It's in a class called products. There's an article. Each one is a class product. And I can drop down in here and kind of take a peek and poke around and see this button here that I actually really want to click. and it is the button called Add. And so somewhere within this article, I want to click the Add link. That's the goal here. Sorry? Yeah, it's a link, yeah. So we could do something like this, where we're basically using the find function to find the article with the class product, and we want the first one. So maybe it's actually, I think, in this case, we'll do first. We're gonna, because we don't really care. There could be 10 of them on there. We only need one, and so it's easy just to kind of say. We could find, and there is one, and would find that one. But I think first is also a pretty good tool for this, because we might not really care which one it chooses. And the user is just as likely to choose the first one in the list as they are the last one. It's not really, they don't really care. We don't really care about that. So I'm going to say first article with the class product. And then I want to, I always forget this, find the link within there. So I'm saying first we'll find that article, and then we'll find a link called add, and then we will take that link that we got back and we'll click on it. And now we can rspec run and check to see if that, how would we know if this worked or not? Item in the cart, so that's what we're looking for right there. Yeah. Yeah, so it found, hey, let's get excited about this. It's okay, we don't have to be embarrassed. It's great. I'd say, as long as we're in control of the robots, it's not a bad world to live in. No, not forever. Not forever. We got a couple options, maybe. Good question. You know, I've never actually used CAPTCHA on any of the sites that I've worked on, so I've never had. Yeah, no, well, I would probably just, if it was test, I probably wouldn't include it. I don't know. I mean, I don't really have to test the CAPTCHA system. That's a third-party library that should be well tested. Yeah, it was exactly.
Because if it fails it, then it's
Sorry?
the mouse track or the track.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The CAPTCHA stuff's interesting. I don't know a ton about it. I mean, I've definitely had my own frustrations as a user having to deal with that, where you're like, that is a car, and that is a car, and these are all the cars. Why you keep showing me cars? And then signs. Now you're showing me signs? Here are all the signs, but why do you keep asking me? It's like 6 attempts. Yes, I feel like, I don't know, some of the hardest tests I've ever... Yeah, exactly. Go comma AI. All right, so I've added that thing, and now I got to think about what's the next thing I want to do. So I'll just kind of do my user stuff here, click that, check that out, and go to the cart, right? So two easy ways to go to the cart, and I'd say one is way easier. Yeah, we'll just navigate there. We could click the button, whether or not, I think it's just as likely the user clicks the button. They could also type in /cart. The whole point is that they're able to go to the cart and that the product is there. We're not actually going to check to see that the product's there. That might be, but maybe you want to do that. Maybe you want to have another test that just checks that adding products works. But right now I'm focused on when I log in, when I give my credit card, that I get thank you for your order with the email address that I provided. That's what I'm actually saying. So I think in that case we'll just visit the /cart page. And who trusts that works? Can we just, okay, good. Yeah, we won't test that then. So what we want to do next is click on this button down here. And then we get into Stripe land. So let's try that out. Let's find what this button is here. And it's a button with a class stripe button element, or L, which I think that's pretty descriptive. I don't believe I'll have any more of those. So I'm going to say let's find that button, or we can just do the first on it, and then click it. So first button. Did it work? That's right. Yeah. So the stripe thing, how long does that take to load? We can check that out. We can say it's not instant, right? But it's pretty quick. But that's exactly right. So what's happening here is that we're taking the screenshot immediately after we click the button. And at that point, it has clicked the button and it has had a chance to render the spinner, which we tend not even to see when we're doing that ourselves in the app, right? But it's taken a little time for that to show up. Now, what's really cool about this test framework is that, and this might not be entirely clear at first, but when it is doing certain actions, like trying to find something or fill in something, it will actually take a little time looking for it before it gives up. It's not going to try once and then give up. It's going to actually try for 2 seconds, and if it doesn't find it within 2 seconds, then it's going to bail. And so in this case, if I try and add the credit card number, well, it will, do we have a credit card number? No, we don't. Do we have a credit card number? No, we don't. Do we have a credit card number? No, we don't. After 2 seconds, it'll say, well, we didn't find one, so now we fail the test. But this gives it a chance for the thing to load. And as soon as that credit card input field is within the DOM, then it finds it and it puts the credit card number in there, it moves to the next step. So 2 seconds is pretty good for most of our usage. All right, we'll just leave it for that. So I think that based on that understanding, we can actually just now try and fill in this form, and as long as the thing actually shows up within 2 seconds, then we're okay with that. Okay, so we have to figure out how to target this thing here. And this is where it gets to be a little bit dangerous, because who provides this code to us? What is going on over here? Oh, there we go. Stripe provides this to us, so we don't really have a lot of control on what happens. And look at this reCAPTCHA frame. I don't even know what that is. We've got this here, iframe. And so this whole thing from Stripe is in an iframe. It's their code. They're delivering it to us when we make the request. So it's very possible things inside of here will change and that our tests will break as a result of that, but we just have to accept that, right? And just try and fix them and maintain them as we go. We've got this iframe called Stripe Checkout App, or at least the class is named Stripe Checkout App. And so I'm going to use scoping to go within this iframe. And then within the iframe, I'm going to be looking for this form here, which, why is that doing that? Oh, it's just so chopped down, right? Yeah, okay. So this thing here is the input field. And the normal things I would use maybe would be the class or the ID. And this ID, like, I recognize it as unique, as like a unique identifier, but I don't recognize it as, like, I don't know if it changes on me. And if it changes on me, then my test breaks, right? And I don't know if maybe if I test it today and I test it tomorrow and it's still the same, I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe I just use this. But the problem is that what happens if they do an upgrade and it recreates this hash or whatever, and then that's delivered to me and now my test breaks. So I'm not going to use this because I don't know enough about it. This thing here is just way too kind of, I guess, ambiguous for me. So I don't really want to use that. Type telephone, it's a credit card number, so that's not really helping me out there. But then there's this placeholder down here called card number, and I feel like this is the best thing to use to try and target this field. It's possible that would change, but I think for this instance I'm okay with that. So let's go back here. Oops. I think it's within frame that I have to do here, which is a little bit different than, yeah, so within the frame, stripe. Do. And, come on. All right. So in here I want to fill in the card number with, and then I can just put in, it's like 41110 or 4224242, yeah, so. Okay, I just do that because I find it a little easier to count the 4 2s. I don't know. And I don't need to do a comma there. Also going to, let's just check that out. Let's see if our expectation that when the thing is on the stage, it'll add it to the input field, that should work with our timing. The screenshot won't be taken until after it's in there now. So we should get a little bit of a different result. Okay, this is good news for us, right? And just what we had talked about, where as soon as it didn't have to be fully animated in, as soon as it found that field within the DOM, it put the number in there and it took the screenshot immediately. That's why we see this sort of half faded in state that we have now. Okay. So I need to do a very similar thing for these other fields here. I'm going to continue to use placeholders, so mm/yy and cvc. So say mm/yy with, what do I put in here? Future date. So what are we at now? 10. So is that that's okay? Yeah. Okay, that's working. It looks like it, at least. When does this test break? Yeah, well, next month, right? Yeah. So, yeah. Now, if I do it this way, and I just say, well, it has to be in the future, it's a really important thing to identify. But this, just being in the future isn't enough, because if it's only next week, then it'll break next week. If it's next month, it'll break next month. And if we say 1/19, it'll break January 1st. And it's situations like this where, let's say it's your first job, first day, and you go in extra early, and they tell you we commit on the first day. Don't worry, it doesn't go to production, but we commit on the first day. Okay, cool. I'm going to do some change to this documentation over here. That can't hurt anyone, right? It's impossible. And so you do your change to the documentation, the onboarding documentation you've been reading. There's a spelling mistake. You commit it, and the automated tests run, and you get an email saying you broke the project. And you're like, how is that possible? I just changed documentation. And what happened was that you happened to start on the day that this code no longer worked, right? And that just because you triggered the rebuild and the test, you also were responsible. You were also made responsible for that break, right? So we want to be careful of that, and it's going to happen every now and then. No one gets in trouble for that. The person who wrote this should be taking responsibility for it. So what's a better solution when we're trying to put the date in? Yeah, we could do sort of a dynamic thing, one that just says where are we now, and let's just put it a time in the future from that date, not from today that we're writing the code, but from the day that the code is run. And so, because other things I've heard from people is just put 99 in here. Okay, well, we'll never run into that. Our software cannot last that long, right? But I actually would say, does Stripe even accept an expiration from that? I can't imagine they would. I would find it hard to believe that they would accept an expiration that was more than 10 years from now. I don't know of any credit cards that last more than 5 years without being. Sorry? Yeah, anything can happen in the future. We won't have credit cards, so none of this will matter, right? But so what you want to do first is you want to come back here and you want to test what you thought would be okay. And if you put 11.99 in here or 1.99, it's not going to work. I think I tried 50, and I think that worked. So it's somewhere between 50 and 99, I think. Still not good enough for me. I like the first that other idea of making this more dynamic. So I'll put 1 slash. Oh, it's I'm in Ruby land now. Okay. Date.today.year plus 1. Right. I just always put it a year. Put it next year's January 1st, and when we hit January 1st, it'll be 2020. So that this will use. I like that. It's a good question, and we would want to confirm that that worked before we went forward. So what we'll do is we'll just test this out. We'll run it, and then we'll take a look at the screenshot, see what it actually does for us, and figure out whether or not that works or not. So if we just do it that way, it's going to put 2019. And as good testers, we think about all the possibilities, right? We think about, does 2019 work? Now, has anyone put 4 characters in or as the year when they were testing manually? Why not? Is it because it's Stripe's code and it's their problem? Or we just didn't think? Yeah. So it instructed you, right? But as testers, we should be thinking about, just because we say to put year, that a user could put 2019 in no problem. And we should be testing that ourselves before they get to that point, right? So the way that we do that is we just put in our credit card number, and we say 1/2019, and we give it a shot. And it seems to be OK with that. So I would say that 4 characters is just fine. I think it's just, even though there's no validation within the user interface that forces users to use 2 numbers. So it's very possible they could put 4 numbers in there just as easily as they could put 2 in. We can't make the assumption that they're just going to follow. Nobody reads anything. Like, no one actually reads anything. That sign, the sign on my door that says, "Please bring deliveries downstairs," and then they just knock on the upstairs door instead. It's right there, like in front of you. I don't. Okay, where am I? Here we go. Oh, don't need that. Okay. So the last one I want to do is the CVC, and I'm just going to make some assumptions here. I'm pretty comfortable with the fact that 111 works. And then I need to click something like that, maybe. It says pay there, so I'll try that out. And what do we expect our screenshot to show us? Order page, okay. Okay, so that screenshot was taken immediately after we click the button. How long does it take for that stuff to happen? We can do a quick test to see. It's always not going to be, there's not going to be a single number, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about the 5-second mark, it went away. And then, what happened here? Invalid positive integer. I just did. Oh, that's interesting too. You'll notice that it actually auto-filled in the 0, 1 for me for this when I was typing it in, but my test just has 1. So that's kind of, I don't think that's it, but well, let's see. No, it doesn't let me. Oh, wow. Well, you know what? That's why. So because I'd submitted the product, then when I went back, there is no product in this cart, and I think when I try and, this is I haven't seen this before. Yeah, like was that one of the changes you had to make? I don't remember.
Yeah, when we go to the card.
Right, it just says, yeah, cool. So that fixes that problem, right? So that's all I was running into, is that even though the cart was there, when I refreshed, it was actually gone because I had checked it out already. So what I should do is is go back to this, add the thing, and then that should work just fine. 5 seconds about, and then it takes you here, does the navigation. So we have another debug tool that we can use for this. Careful of this, it's just a debug tool. This is not what we put in our actual tests, because it'll increase the running of this test by 5 seconds, and if you put that in 10 different tests, that's a lot of time. So I use this to figure out whether or not something is maybe just not happening fast enough. And so this is now, because that saved screenshot is not going to wait and take that 2 seconds. It doesn't know what it's looking for. It's just going to happen immediately. So now if I sleep for 5 seconds and then take the screenshot, maybe it'll see that order page. In addition to finding input fields and like searching for things, also expect. It does that 2 seconds. It expects for 2 seconds, and then if it doesn't find it, it gives up after that. So, okay. So about 5 seconds worked fine. We can now see this page. We should set up what we expect to see here, right? That I expect page to have content. I think that's it. Expect page to have content. That's right. And thank you for your order. And my email address up here, first@user.com. Okay. Something like that, right? Oops. Come on. Don't add it when I don't need it. You should be smarter than that. Okay, wish me luck. So it failed. And it says that when we expected the page to have this content, thank you for your order, first@user.com, it expected to find the text, thank you for your order at user.com, first@user.com, and then it gives me a chunk of all the text that it can find on the page right now. And what does this represent right now? It hasn't navigated. And I would say that it tried for 2 seconds and gave up. Because we know it takes about 5 seconds for the Stripe stuff to go away. So what I want to do is show you how to avoid including the sleep. And that is through configuration of our tooling here. So we'll go to spec. We will change Rails helper, I believe. Yep. And there's going to be a capybara setting that we'll use here to change what the max default wait time is. That's what they call it. I think it's the max default wait time. It is referenced right here. So normally Capybara is pretty good at handling the async behavior in the browser. This becomes trickier with Stripe integration. May need to add Capybara default max wait time and increase that value. And the reason we like this over sleep, why do we like to do this rather than sleep? Sorry. Right. That's right, yeah. So this will use the minimum amount of time necessary. So putting it at 10 seconds just gives us a lot more breathing room. And I could do 5 seconds, but it was way too close to 5 seconds that it's possible. Just the different, maybe running on a slightly slower machine would cause it to break on that machine because it takes 6 seconds instead of 5. So I'm going to say 10 seconds because the Stripe is what I now need for this, okay? So I can definitely go back here and run this now and see what we get in terms of if that test passes or not. What's going on here? Oh, you're right. That'll add 5 seconds and still take. Okay, good. So okay. And here, if we go, oops, we get rid of that sleep. Now, 10 seconds have to go by before it stops looking for this content here, and then it'll take the screenshot perhaps, so that would work fine. But we don't need the screenshot anymore. We're done debugging, right? So we get rid of that. We don't even include that. Because here's another thing that might break your tests without you, just sort of randomly without you expecting it. Let's say that you have a test that actually generates a screenshot on every run. And every time code is committed, it runs these tests. And so you're starting to create a library full of these screenshots. How much space does the hard drive that the machine that's running these tests have on it? Who knows? Let's say it's gigabytes. There is a point in time where you might create enough of these screenshots that you will run out of space on the drive and your test will fail because it can't create the screenshot anymore. So, you know, it's unlikely, but I've definitely seen it happen. And it was more for tests where we actually wrote some tests that would automatically go through the user interface, take screenshots, and then provide those screenshots to the manual QA testers, and then they could verify really quickly whether or not things, without actually having to go in and navigate themselves. So for example, we had interfaces where you would you go and you choose your hockey teams, and so you cycle through all the teams. Now for NHL, that's pretty straightforward. You've got a few different leagues with maybe 20, 30 teams in each league. Whereas with FIFA, you've got many, many countries, many, many leagues in each country, and many, many teams on each league. So you've got these massive number of assets that you have to keep up to date and maintain. So one of the tests we would write would be, instead of a QA tester having to regress, and that means go through every single team in every league in every country every day, basically, you would write a test that did that automatically, would take a screenshot of every single logo, and then you would actually just be looking at your whatever imaging tool where you see all your photos in more of like a grid view, and you could just quickly scroll through. And if you saw any big, ugly green boxes, it meant that asset was missing. And so you could just identify it that way quickly. Well, now, if we ran this too often and we weren't paying attention, then it's possible we could break the tests by just filling up our hard drive with that content. So log files, screenshots, anything like that, I've heard of it breaking tests before. It wasn't a website, it was a video game. It's like, yeah, like FIFA 2012 or whatever. Okay. So we've written one test, right? And this is what I would say, we wrote the feature and then we wrote the test that tested that feature, right? So this is not test-driven development because we had basically decided we'd considered everything when we wrote the feature in the first place. Writing tests after the fact is a good thing to do, but we also sometimes want to write tests before. And I think I've actually created a pretty good opportunity for that. We've got this this is more of like a hybrid approach, where maybe we write some tests for the features that exist, and then we leverage the code we wrote to create tests for features we've not yet created. So I've got this scenario here where a user can order after they've logged in. And I might also just want to say that I have another scenario here where a user can order without logging in. Who tested this? You did? And how did it work for you? It worked all right? It didn't break? You'd already... Okay. So if I... again, my Rails is not exactly the same as what you would have finished with. But at the beginning, I know that the project definitely does not support doing it without a login. And we'll see what some of those errors are. So this is kind of like what test-driven development might look a little bit like. And that would be, I'm going to take, so out of this stuff, what can I reuse? Or maybe what should I leave out? So I want to reuse this stuff, right? Which is basically... Oh, yeah. So I don't think it gives you that option because it has an email. Well, we'll see in a second here. Product and checkout. So I'm going to create this function here called add product and checkout. And it's going to do, oops, no, def. Is it def? Okay, thanks. something like that. Oops. There we go. Okay. So now I've got this little function here that does the add, visit the cart, click the stripe button, check the thing out. And then, so I'm going to run that, and then I'm going to just have my expectation here. So the difference here for my other test is that I'm going to visit the root page, because that's where I need to start. That's where the login redirects me to. I'm going to add product and checkout, and then I'm going to expect that the page has, I kind of get to decide what it has right now in this case. I'm going to put that in there. Okay. So if I run this, yeah, one first pass, good, it's still working. And then I get this error. And sort of what I wanted to highlight here was that this error is a difference between a test failing error and an application crashing error. And we want to identify which one it is. So what do we have here? Yeah, no method error. This is our app crashing when we're trying to do something. And so I'm going to go over here and try and do what I just did, which is log out as my user, go to the root page, add a product, go to the cart, pay for it. There you go. And this is the same error. And this you're very familiar with. It's the same thing. It's just not red and white as much, right? I guess it's red and slightly blue in this case. But the idea is that this gives us all the information we need to actually figure out why this is not working and then fix it, and then we rerun the test. So I shouldn't have to go back here to test this over and over and over again. I should just be able to iterate inside the browser here. So, oops, I should have. I think I'll get it this way. So it was basically the orders controller RB file. I'm trying to call email on a nil class. So orders controller RB is what I want to load up. Let's do that. Oops. No, what is it again? It's this one? Yeah, there we go. Orders, controller, down here. And I've got a create order function here. And this is the line that it was complaining about. So to me, that seems like current underscore user is nil at this point when I'm trying to get the email from it. And so that's because I have not logged in, so current user should be nil. This is not really the right solution, but we're just trying to show kind of what the process looks like. So we'll say here, we'll check first, oops, current user.nil. If so, then we will have an empty string, otherwise we'll send the email, all right? So that, I mean, this fixes it. This is not what I'd want to do in a real site because I'd want to have the opportunity for the user to be putting an email in. But again, this is a way to fix that crash, so we're going to run this. And now it's just taking a little bit longer, right? Because we're going to run that first test, and then it's going to. Okay, first test passed. And second test, come on. Another fail, or this is a fail, but again, is this a test failure or is this an app crash failure?
Yeah.
The app is crashing again, and it's the same error, right? Here it's saying I've got undefined method email for nil class. It means I'm trying to access a property on a nil class, so that's not going to work. It's a different part of the app. It looks like it's our templating system instead. And the file that we want to go to is app views orders show HTML ERB. So I'm going to load that up. Show orders. So I'm in the show orders file. I'm going to look for, yeah, again, it's accessing current user, even though it's not checking to see if that user exists. So we're going to do quick here, something like if current user nil. I think that's Ruby, right? Else. And something like that. Come on. I get to choose the indenting. Okay, so if current user is nil, then I'm going to, my test actually decided this for me, right? Like, this is where it's a little weird to do that test-driven stuff, is you're kind of making decisions about your user interface and your application while you're writing the test. In my test, that's where I decided that it was going to say, thank you for your order with an exclamation mark, that it was going to leave the email out. And so I'm going to just follow that here. I'm going to run that. I think that's right. And we get to wait for those tests. But the cool thing is I get to check my email. I get to drink my water. I get to do something that is not navigating my website over and over and over, right? And if this is taking 3 to 5 minutes, then that's actually a really good time that you could use on email and things that you kind of get in the way. You can make use of this time. So that's now passing. We fixed the 2 issues that we ran into, and we didn't open the browser except just to show you that we're getting the exact same error between the 2. So that's the idea behind test-driven development, is we get this sort of red-green feedback loop until the app works, right? That is all I had for today. Thanks everyone for going through that. Take a look at the references cheat sheet. I'm not a super fan of these, but I know it does make people a little more comfortable. They just don't include everything, and so they kind of include what they want you to see. But it's a nice way to kind of have a quick lookup. My notes will be sent out, and bonus on this one is just talking a little bit about the JavaScript has tools like this as well. We can do all the things we talked about here in JavaScript as well if we want to. Cool? Thanks, everyone. Yeah.